Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Power with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Texans about what's going on in our schools. Today, I am so excited to be joined by the leadership of the city school in Austin. I have Karon and Travis Reese, the head of schools and a board member who have taken this school from a small school in East Austin to a thriving location that parents are seeking out. They're helping to expand the education freedom accounts, and they're here to talk about all of the schools and children that can benefit with this new program. Karon, Travis, thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to hear about the families that you all are serving in your school, the families that are seeking you out, particularly now that the education freedom accounts are in action. So, Karon, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about the students that your school is serving.
Great, Mandy, thanks. It's good to be here. We serve a variety of students, and out of our 99 students, a good third of them are have a learning diagnosis or some emotional needs that they need support with. And then 75% of our families receive tuition assistance, and 70% of those receive more than 50% in tuition assistance. So we serve low-income families who are seeking support for children with learning disabilities. Mm-hmm. In the early years of City School, we were one of the only schools that provided that kind of support for students, and while other schools have continued to expand their services, mm-hmm. which is great, City School really loves to nurture those relationships, build into them. One of these things the students really lack is confidence, and so loving them in that.
That's wonderful. And to be clear, when you're talking about students with special education needs and things like that, you're talking about dyslexia, some of the more common problems that we're hearing parents that are struggling, particularly in the traditional public school system.
Right. So most of our students that we serve either have dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, or some combination of that. We have a few children that are high functioning on the spectrum. And then we have a couple of kids who just need some extra support with counseling and encouragement.
That's awesome. Okay, Travis, let's talk about your role as a board member and your role as a parent and a patriot that saw the important need for the education freedom accounts. Talk to us a little bit about why that was so important and how that's going to impact your school.
Yeah, so historically, City School has had to rely on the generosity of donors primarily to keep the doors open. And so, the numbers that Karon took us through, and you can kind of do the math, and the overwhelming majority of the families that we serve could not, out of their own pocket, afford a faith-based private education for their child. And so, really just on the generosity of donors for decades, they have supported the school and allowed us to kind of extend what is has historically been a luxury to families who otherwise couldn't afford it for themselves. Now, with the passing of the TIFA legislation, a couple things have happened. Our funding sources are going to eventually flip. And so if it goes down the path where we hope that it continues to go down, donations from donors should really just be a small portion, and in some ways maybe capital focused or maybe growth focused, not just needing to rely on donors to keep the doors open. We should be able to do that mostly with just the TIFA funds.
That's incredible. I want to point something out because right now the TIFA funds are coming out at $10,574 is where it roughly is landing. So let's just go with a little over $10,500. And you're saying that it can flip, which this is really important. Sometimes the narrative out there is that private schools cost $30,000, particularly those that are able to do services for special needs. What is the tuition at your school?
So the tuition right now is about $12,500. I think it's $12,495. And at maximum occupancy or max enrollment, we would be right at about that cost, but really close to that from a cost per student of what it costs. And these are small classroom sizes. The education is phenomenal. I mean, it's very individualized. Each child is like known and seen. You're not having any situations where it's a first grade class with 26 kids running around and one teacher. So the environment's incredible, and we can do that at about that cost per student. And so whenever we have families who, don't have the resources to be able to pay that, that's where kind of the TIFA comes in. And again, we may still need to rely on donors to kind of fill that gap.
Sure.
But
that's
yeah, it comes
fantastic.
very
That's
close.
a huge point to point out that you all, City School has been in East Austin for 20 plus years.
Right.
And so you've had those families, you all have had to work to fundraise, but the reality is that you can serve all students, including those that have special needs like dyslexia and things, for significantly less than what the general public thinks a private education, a private Christian education, in fact, would cost. So I think that is so important to point out. Let's go back and talk about the services for students with special needs. This is really, really important. As y'all know, the Education Freedom Accounts, they're prioritized. It's universal, but we had a small amount of money and had to prioritize them. I hope that the next legislative session that you all and families from City School and across Texas that are saying, hey, we want to access our Education Freedom Accounts as well, that they will definitely ensure that money's there. But excuse me, talk to us about the services that y'all provide, particularly to those students that have, you said, dyslexia and dysgraphia, those that I hear from special education families a lot. Their kids really struggle in the traditional public education school, maybe because it's too many kids or they're not getting the services. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so we begin in the early years with our pre-K through third grade, and we provide a support specialist in the classroom. And so while our class size is 12 in the younger grades, 14 in the older grades,
12 students in a class?
In the pre-K through the second grade.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And tuition's less than $13,000.
Yes.
Wow. Incredible. Keep going.
Yeah. So the goal of having the support specialist in the room is to do preventative work and early intervention, because the earlier you identify students and provide support for them, then the less support they need throughout the years. So we are providing that in the pre-K through third grade class now. And so they really have two teachers. And so that allows the support specialists to pull students out in small groups and to provide some one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-three. Sometimes they're pulling kids out who are thriving, so the teacher has more time with a small pocket of kids. And sometimes they're doing one-on-one support for kids who are struggling to read or write, working with them on attention and their choices. So,
and identifying if they can see that there is a potential for
We're
a
looking
problem.
at red flags for dysgraphia. We're looking for fine motor issues and being able to write their ideas.
Okay.
For dyslexia, can the children rhyme? Are they still writing letters backwards in first grade?
Yeah.
I believe early intervention is the best, because then they need less as they get older and they feel more confident and they feel like they're able to be a part of the class.
Yeah.
Students with learning differences really struggle with confidence, and they feel dumb. They often will have a strong IQ, maybe even higher than the average, but because they can't read like their classmates or they can't write as quickly as their classmates, that builds a lot of insecurity in them. And so it takes a while to build that. But if we can build them up from the beginning, then they're going to succeed in the classroom.
Can you give me an example of a student that maybe has had your intervention services and how they're doing now?
Yeah, I was thinking about one student in particular this week, and she's in high school now. But one of the things, when I arrived, she was a third grader. She was a sixth grader, and she was reading at like a third grade level. And that is discouraging. If you're years behind, you're like wanting small chapter books and your classmates are reading thick chapter books. So we worked a lot one-on-one. What works for you? What kind of genre interests you? So then we could hook her on reading, and we just read a lot for her. And it was so fun to watch her read the Odyssey with her classmates as an eighth grader. And so I chatted with her that year and I asked, what do you think would have been different had you not come to City School? And she said, I don't think I would have learned that I love learning. And so as she heads into high school, she's starting her sophomore year, she can think about what she wants. And we met recently and she's like, I don't know if I want to go to college. I don't know what I want to do. And so we just talked through some of those ideas, but thinking about college is an option for her, because she can read well and think clearly about what she wants.
That's so exciting, and that's what we want for every student. And it's really important to talk about those students that have at some point fallen behind, especially as we're watching statewide scores come out, and we have 50% of kids cannot read on grade level, and so many of them have some of these learning differences, these learning disabilities that you talked about, and they're fixable. They are fixable when the student is in the right environment, getting the right education, and that learning strategy that is curated for their needs. So that's encouraging. Travis, I want to talk to you a little bit about your position as a board member. And I'd love to hear about your thoughts as you're thinking about the future. You talked a little bit about the funding sources and this really being available to every family who, of course, pays their property taxes and has had to make, many of them, you all are serving middle and low income families. So I'm sure they're making significant sacrifices to send their students there. Talk to us a little bit about what you all are planning for long term and what you hope to see occur with the growth of the Education Freedom Accounts program.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, we would love to be able to see that every single child is either able to pay the full tuition because they come from a family that has those kind of resources, or every single child who wants to is able to decide, that family is able to decide for themselves which education they want to, participate in, for their child. And so really if things go correctly, we should see everybody either on TIFA or on full pay tuition. And then that gives us, again, the resources that we need in order to sustain the great work that Karon leads at the school. Like Karon's story of the girl who now has college as an option, before for us really keeping the doors open year to year, that was the focus. And how do we increase enrollment? How do we increase our donor base? And now because the future becomes far more stable if we continue to head in the right direction here, we can start thinking about expansion. And so as those conversations have started, nothing's crystallized for us. We don't have a very clear but because of what the possibilities are now, we're talking about campuses and, either in further south or out near Bastrop. So we also, Charlotte Mason, which is the pedagogy of City School, has a lot of overlap with a lot of homeschool. And so, we've talked about hybrid models where maybe a child could come to school a couple days a week and do homeschool another 2 or 3 days a week, kind of that university model. And then we facilitate curriculum and we can facilitate and kind of enable parents at home to do, their own homeschool, but kind of with a City School flavor to it. So and maybe participate in certain, activities that we do as a larger school community. So these are all things that were kind of daydreaming and pie in the sky, 2 years ago that we really had no business spending a bunch of time on. And now these are serious things that the board can consider for the future of our school.
That is so exciting because that is exactly what the Parent Empowerment Coalition, all of the different organizations, including the Texas Homeschool Coalition and dozens of other that united behind Governor Abbott's leadership to finally pass Education Freedom Accounts. But that's what we envisioned, was leaders like yourself talking about what can we do? How do we make this education that parents are choosing for themselves more accessible? So it's really exciting to think that y'all are talking about not just expanding, but also opening up your models. The university model, I'm a huge fan of. I have a lot of friends that do participate in that in other schools. And it's phenomenal, especially for homeschool parents that they want to do that, but maybe they have to work some or whatever. So I'm just thrilled to hear that these conversations are taking place at your school and that we know that they're taking place at hundreds of schools across the state of Texas, that parents are coming to them and saying, well, what if we did this, and really figuring out how to do it. So talking about parents, Karon, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the conversations that you've had with parents, particularly anyone that's been needing financial aid, that received an Education Freedom Account, or even those that are newly applying for your school because they finally feel like we can do this. Talk to me about some of these parents.
It's been sweet because they see the TIFA program as also championing it for City School. They are grateful to be able to have tuition assistance. Like some families can only pay $100 a month, and that's significant, and they are grateful for that. And when they receive the TIFA funds, they're so excited to be able to support the school in a different way. We have one family in particular who comes to mind that they also have tutoring needs, right? Their daughter has dyslexia. They have a significant tuition assistance, but they they need tutoring, and tutoring for children with dyslexia is expensive. They need sessions 4 or 5 times a week for 3 years, and those sessions are at minimum $70 a session.
Okay.
And so,
Can you say that again? Because we do have a lot of families whose children have special needs, and they feel like they're not getting service. Your process, you just kind of said what it looks like to get children with dyslexia reading. So what does it take?
So an Orton Gillingham based program. And so this particular family, they wanted to provide that for their student outside and above what we did at school.
Okay.
And, but they couldn't afford it because, like I said, it's $70 minimum an hour.
Okay.
And, 4 or 5 times a week over a month, over the school year, a little bit in the summer for 3 years. It adds up.
That adds up.
Yeah. And so the mom was just in tears recently because she's like, we have money to afford tutoring now. And that tutoring for children, if you don't have money and you see a need for your child, it's like needing to go to the doctor without having insurance, right? You're like, I need to take them, but oh my gosh, an ER visit is so expensive. And so now they can afford to provide the support for their daughter. And it was fun because this year she really worked. Last year they did a GoFundMe so they could afford to pay for her tutoring. The child refused to read in class oftentimes. She didn't want to try because it's humbling. But through the work that they were able to do, and they look forward to continuing to do because of the TIFA funds, the student was able to read a poem in front of the entire student body this year. And it just brought tears to my eyes. And I think the most beautiful part of that is that in the middle of it, she looks at me and goes, "What's this word?" And so she felt confident enough to read and to ask for help in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And that just shows a lot of growth. And I just look forward to that for more of our students, that they can provide the extra support that they need.
When you talk about that confidence, that is so exciting and so encouraging. But the fact that she could not only do it and had the confidence to get up, but that she asked for help. Talk a little bit about the environment. You all are a faith-based school, and it's smaller class sizes. Yeah. Talk about the culture that you've created that would help encourage that young lady to know that it's okay to ask for help when you're struggling.
Exactly. As we said, our class sizes are small, which means our community is fairly small. So we have about 100 students this coming year. But what that allows for is for children to be heard, seen, and known, right? And so she knows she can trust me. She knows I know her story. She knows that I champion her, that I'm going to rally behind her. And I would say that's true about our community overall. When someone asks what's special about City School, the first answer you'll get is the community. And I've been thinking about that recently, like what makes our community different than any other community? Because most people would say that about their schools, right? Oh my gosh, it's a great community. Sure. But there is a sense of nurturing and grace, conflict resolution. So I would say that even we don't brush things under the rug. We have real conversations. We have deep conversations and support one another in all of that.
That's beautiful. That's fantastic.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, please.
I'm also a city school dad.
Okay.
And so it's probably the reason I'm on the board is because I fell in love with the school and the way it loved my daughter. And, there were definitely times that she was in pre-K and she had a lot of outbursts. And I think that if she was in a larger classroom, she would have maybe been seen as a burden or a bad kid or been labeled in that sort of a way. And the way the school came around my daughter and now she's delightful.
What did they do? I have a spirited young little girl too. So
Karen can tell you what they did.
I mean, I would love to. What are you doing in the classrooms? I think that's important, especially. Look, we can look across again. I point to the public school system that we all want to see get better, but not having discipline, not having the ability to help students learn to regulate, particularly when they're younger, is really important. What did they do for your daughter?
Go ahead.
Karon, can you talk about what I would say is that I think in a different setting, if I look back on my own, when I was in kindergarten, for what I remember about it, when I was in first grade, if I would have kind of seen these behaviors in a larger classroom, and I'm a teacher, spread too thin, really this child would have received less attention, would have probably gotten, again, like the bad kid label,
Right.
and may have self-identified as that for years. And instead, she was just loved and wrapped around, and, was seen as, yeah, she's growing through this. That's kind of her for now. And, I think through nurturing at home, through nurturing at school, and just through general maturity, she's grown through that. And, she's loved there. She's seen there, she's understood. I'd love you to talk a little about character block. But anyways, you can talk about what y'all did for me specifically. But.
Yeah.
What's character block? What is that?
Character block, each year at the end of the year, each student receives a block from their teacher, and the teacher writes the most loving, nurturing paragraph to the student, and they read. And so a student might get generosity because they're a student who is always giving and nurturing in other relationships. They might get boldness because they're willing to say hard things, they're willing to speak up. Stand up for their friends. And so there's different character traits. And so it's just fun to kind of see those build over the years. My kids were at City School in their early years, and I still have their character blocks at home. Someone on social media, one of our alumni, sent us a picture of their character blocks recently and just commented how important they were, because it's just a way to speak into children about who they are and how they were seen, and to just build what is already a strong trait in them.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
so you're identifying their virtues and what they're, I love that. So my children's school, they go to a classical charter school, and they do something as well similar to that. It's not a block, but it's it's like a little wood chip, and we use them as Christmas ornaments because they're it's special, and it's something outside of not just the academia, but it is that whole child. It is making sure that they know those important talents that God has given them and how they can develop them. I love that.
What I love about ours being the block is that at the end of the year we have we give all the blocks back out to the kids in one ceremony. And so each class will take the blocks and we put the character traits on the front side so they can be read. So you can see all the traits of that class. And so then you get like, oh, it looks like a little city. And just the idea of City School is a school that is for all the children of God. The idea of City School came from the idea of St. Augustine's The City of God, where a place for everyone to belong. And so that's the idea. It's just really meaningful when you see them all together.
That is so cool. I love that. I hope y'all will post that on social media so we can see it. I want to see it. That's a beautiful idea. Well, as you're thinking about the next phases, we talked a little bit about of City School and making sure that every child feels seen and that every parent has access to this education if they choose that. What do you hope to see in the future? What do you hope to see your school grow in the future?
I know Travis touched on that a little bit, but one of the things that we've often desired for City School is a high school. And I've always said we can't start a high school until we can fund a high school, because I didn't want to recreate a problem, right? We're still having to raise all this extra funding.
Right.
But TIFA funds would allow us to do that, and that would allow our students who want to continue in a sweet, strong, nurturing community to have that opportunity.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up, I'm so excited to hear about the opportunity that you all are seizing and that your families are seizing to provide great educations to kids. But of course, we said this was a limited amount of money. It was $1 billion, which was amazing, right? I mean, that was enough. I think we're at over 102,000 families are accessing it. But the reality is that at this point, you combine the 170,000 families on a wait list plus tens of thousands more that have said, hey, I want to do it next year. There's going to have to be more funding allocated for students, for families that want to select your school. I want you to look in that camera, and I'm going to start with Travis. I want you to talk as a parent and as a board member of a school that has the opportunity to grow. Talk to the leaders, talk to the legislators, and to fellow parents about why it's so important that we continue to support and grow the education freedom accounts.
Yeah, I don't think that any parent should be trapped in an educational situation that they don't want their child subjected to. And so if they're a tax-paying citizen who is contributing to this state, they should have the choice to be able to send those education resources, those dollars, to whatever school is the best place for their child. I think every single one of us, if we ask ourselves, how would we want to be treated? What would we want to be able to do? What freedoms would we want? We'd want the freedom to be able to decide how where our child is going to spend 40 plus hours a week, being influenced and nurtured or not nurtured, educated or not educated, and the community that you want to be around. And so I think we need to I think it should be a universal, as universal as the state of Texas is. It should be a universal funding, and simply if you qualify, you sign up, and you can send your kid to receive the education that you think is ideal for that child.
Thank you, Travis. All right, Karon.
All right.
Look in that camera and tell the leaders exactly the importance of protecting and growing education freedom count so City School can continue to grow and serve wonderful families.
Yeah. I think first I'd just like to say thank you. I am so grateful that the legislature passed the ESA program, that we now have TIFA. It's giving families opportunities for their children that they didn't have before, and those opportunities can be endless. And so it is important for children and families to have choice in how they educate and where they educate their children.
Travis, Karon.
I'll say thank you as well. And also thanks to TPPF. Y'all were excellent during kind of the process to help us understand what do we need to do to be to kind of get ahead of this and be prepared to participate in this program. And so grateful to your organization for that.
Of course, there's a whole host of people here, and there's an army in the Parent Empowerment Coalition. There's of course great leaders like Governor Abbott that would not stop. So we just need to continue to grow and build so that great schools like you can grow and build and serve students like your own daughter. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us today on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. And now you have the power.